Good morning. Joe Wenberg, Bluebird Semaphore. And I have to check and make sure this is running. Yeah, I think it is. So, anyway, I'm going to continue talking about the book on Thomas Jefferson. See if I could clear up some issues. So I made some notes, which I never do, as you know. And there they are. See them? A few notes. I will talk about this. So once again, I'm talking about the book, and the previous video was just a book talk, Thomas Jefferson, The Art of Power. So I talked about that book a little. And today I'm going to fill in the blanks. I'm going to start with some comments on something that is referred to as the poplar forest. That's the tree, poplar tree, which was established as a retreat in the township of Bedford, Virginia. A retreat for Thomas Jefferson, a man who had 1,000 acres, a grand mansion known as Monticello, whatever. And yet he needed a retreat because the world was just so overwhelming for the poor man. He had to get away from it. The world was calling, and he needed his refuge. And so they built like a miniature Monticello up there in Bedford, and he would go and try to get away from whatever was going on, both when he was living in the presidential house and in Monticello. To give you an idea of how big this retreat was, this little bungalow in the woods, while he was still in Washington, basically living in the presidential house, he ordered Windsor chairs for the retreat for Poplar Forest. And he ordered 3 dozen chairs. So in that so-called bungalow, he had space for dining for at least 36 people to sit down at a table. This is a man who was the great advocate for the little guy. Great advocate. You know, back in those days, anybody who was doing anything was an aristocrat. Whether it was Jefferson or Washington, Hamilton, although Hamilton, as you know, started out as an orphan. But he beat his way up the social path and got to high prominent places until Aaron Burr shot him dead on a promontory in West New York. I used to drive by there often because I had to go to work somewhere near there. And there is a bronze plaque commemorating the duel. But Burr shot him dead, and that was it for Hamilton. Anyway, this poplar forest was pretty much the spitting image. Not really. It was much smaller than Monticello, whatever. And but it had a general appearance. in the Monticello state. Now, when I looked at the picture, I noticed that there were three entryways for carriages, horse-drawn carriages. So right away, you know that these weren't the the poor and the destitute. These were the high and mighty who were coming to Poplar Forest to see old TJ. The high and mighty. Anyway, and they don't have those in Monticello. That place was so big, they just rolled up in front of it, and then the servants took over. Get the coaches and the horses taken care of. It was good to be an aristocrat back in those days. You know, everybody did what you needed. They all got it done. Now today, the aristocrats, of course, hide in faraway places, and you can't get at them anymore. Not that you ever could, but if you wanted to hold them to paying their taxes, it's basically impossible, from what I understand. But then again, what do I know? Listen. So that was one thing I wanted to cover, was the popular forest, the mini Monticello. It's only meant to be a retreat for a man who already had 1,000 acres and a house composed of something like 34 rooms, three stories, 34 rooms. The next item I was going to talk about is the medallion. I came across this actually outside the book. Maybe it's mentioned in the book, but Thomas Jefferson, had a medallion struck, and kind of a little bit like in a stretched out oval shape. It's on the internet, and there you see him with his ponytail, you know, looking quite the dandy. Now, I understand that this was done, I don't want to say quite often, but I believe that the horde of folks around the creation of the country all got medallions struck. And TJ was one of the last. I may have come across this on the Antique Roadshow too, by the way. And I think the price was something between 30 and 40 or 40 and $50,000, because it's like extremely rare. So, person who got that, possession of that, got a real find. And I think it was just a hand-me-down in her family. So, I wanted to talk about that. Now, once again, medallions weren't being struck for the common man. You had to be a big-time aristocrat to do that. The third thing that's coming up here is oh yeah, we talk a little bit about good old Sally. You know who I mean, Sally Heming. Good old Sally. Yeah, authors always like to point out that things that we would think in this day and age is extremely antisocial and extremely bad behavior. Authors almost always like to point out, well, you got to consider the time. You know, this was normal for you, big-time white aristocrat with big-time manor, meaning the house, the manor house. It was normal for you to take on a slave girl at 14 and turn her into your concubine. That was normal, and the man doing that wouldn't have thought twice about it, which TJ didn't. As a matter of fact, he never emancipated that gal. Now, he emancipated other people, but he didn't emancipate her. Even after he died, she was still essentially a slave. Now, she lived better than other slaves. She probably lived better than most of the poor whites. Undoubtedly. She had access. So, but one thing is clear, that once TJ checked out, she beat a path far from his residence. Why, I don't know. I haven't dug into Sally Hemings' life. I don't know how interesting it could be, really. I mean, slavery and all that is such a beat up topic. There's no more room for investigation. We all know what happened, you know. And so why continue the search for knowledge in the field of slavery? We know what happened. Slavery's been around since the beginning of time. And it's still around, only thing they call it something else. So, and so the historians like to whitewash this whole affair. But as far as I'm concerned, you can't whitewash it. Thomas Jefferson knew in his heart of hearts, he had to know that enslaving another human being was a no-no, was a bad thing. But one thing he was an expert at was turning the other way, looking away. He could do that, you know, just wonderful, just wonderful. He could turn away and it doesn't matter. I don't see it, it doesn't exist. So the aberrations that come along with slavery, he doesn't see them. All he sees is a relatively good-looking, very light-skinned black girl who he's going to have his way with. And essentially, they have 6 children. 2 died, 4 live, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of animosity in that whole deal. But one thing for sure, TJ was looking the other way. He didn't want this to be a blight on his glorious image. He wanted people to think that he was the best of the best. There was none other like him alive on the planet during the days that he lived. And you know what? The human beings that lived in the day were more than happy to make him continue to think that way. There was worship all over the place when it came to TJ. They loved him. Loved him. And so Sally Heming lived pretty much as a slave her entire life. I believe that at some point she was allowed to live in the house. She had some sort of meager room. I'm getting the idea that in the book or somewhere the meager room was conveniently located for TJ. Probably if you wanted to look into it, I'm sure the Sally Hemings affair would have all sorts of little goodies to entertain the reader. But I'm not going to do that. So there we go. Sally Heming. So that was one of the things I wanted to cover. There's more here. There's I'm talking about, I doubt if TJ would have passed muster as a scientist in this day and age. Matter of fact, I'm sure he wouldn't, because he didn't like to do the hard work that would come with today's type of scientific investigation. In other words, doing what do scientists do? They do experiments, they do investigations, all that. What Tommy liked to do was to read the findings of others, and then, when he had the chance, speak that stuff and make everybody see just how knowledgeable he was. He was big on letting people think he knew stuff. And he would get on a topic for a while, and then he would be on to the next one. As a scientist in this day and age, basically you really can't do that. You got to get on your topic and you got to stick with it. But not TJ. Now, of course, they'll say, well, that's not the way they did it back then. He was a man of nature. He was a man of study. Yeah, well, so was Erasmus, and so was Emerson. So were a lot of other people. But they never came off as an arrogant cur. Was that too harsh? I don't know. Just arrogant. Let's amend that to just, they were not arrogant people. When you talk about arrogance, if you look into how he performed before, during, and during the Louisiana Purchase, you'll know everything you need to know about the guy. I think I talked about that in the other video. I think I said he stole it from France, from Napoleon. So anyway, that place he had built, and he had it built twice, by the way. First time wasn't good enough. And I think we're looking at a period that covered almost 40 years just to build a place. Anyway, it's referred to in the book as a grand manor. I kind of recall that being said, although I could have read that somewhere else. A grand manor. What that means is, Grand Manor was the principal house on a feudal estate, and I read into this that that TJ, the lover of history that he was seeking to reintroduce the feudal system into the New World. That's what I read into that. Making such a grand house, which is essentially in the nature of a grand manor. Now, was it a castle? No, I don't think so. I think many a duke and many a European high and mighty lord had castles that were, bigger and grander than Monticello, but still, the sweep and the basic feeling you get from such a large structure as Monticello is not unlike what you possibly would get if you were standing in front of some duke's castle, or Winston Churchill's estate. What was that? Bell something. Or any of the other ones. So he's trying to recreate feudalism in America by simply establishing structures and then establishing a way of life, essentially slavery. Read serf, same thing. Although I have seen it argue one way or the other that a serf's life was better than a slave's, and a slave's life was better than a serf. There are some differences, but the bottom line is neither was free. None of them were free. Okay? And what the American Revolution likes to say what it was all about was making a country of free men. They rarely say women, but free men. And essentially, you didn't get free men from the revolution. What you got was men that now were more threatened by military might than ever before. For example, at one point in his career as president, I think it was towards the latter part of the second term, they were getting in tough waters with England. And it looked like they may have to go to war. Now, to even think about it, in the early days of this country, Washington's days, Adams' days, to even think about going to war was just a big no-no. Now, Adams finally came around and he would have gone to war in a heartbeat. But Jefferson and that presidency was close to having to make a decision. The decision always was embargo, war, or back down. Now, none of those three choices were very satisfying to the people of this country. First of all, the Federalists were always about going to war, because going to war may result in them being able to put a crown on somebody's head. And that was their fondest goal. We want a king. We want a king. We want somebody to worship. That's what they wanted. The Republicans, who were the other party, in this case, they were getting very close to saying, we're going to need a war, we're going to have to build up our navy, and we're going to have to be ready for an attack. So to be ready for an attack, Congress passed laws making it absolutely must-do business of each state to get 100,000 men in each state's militia ready to go on the march. Imagine that, 100,000. That's a lot of people for such a small country. But that's what they were on their way to doing. I'm not sure if they ever got there. I think they didn't. But it just shows you what's in their minds. I mean, these people, they say one thing and they do another. I told you that in the beginning about TJ. He was wishy-washy. He says one thing, then he goes the other. You know, he did that with the Louisiana Purchase. Oh, I'm going to go to Congress. We're going to vote on this. I'm not just going to step out there and do this on my own. And then probably less than a month later, that's exactly what he did. So we talked about the militia. Okay. So, like, to me, he doesn't appear to be the great man of freedom. The world wants to believe he is. And this just came to me, I don't know why, but to me, you know, he is the author, so-called the author of the Declaration of Independence. But to me, any studious hippie in one of the elite colleges during the 60s, say Harvard, Yale, Princeton, any studious student, one who was paying attention and doing his studies, could have written the Declaration of Independence. It's no big deal. A lot of flowery words, a lot of idealism. From what I understand, Jefferson got his thoughts, as did everybody else in the day, by reading John Locke, who, quite frankly, I don't know what all the buzz is about, but that's who they read to get their justification for what they did. Now, I'm not finding anything wrong with what they did. God knows for sure I don't want to be living under the rule of Britain, France, Germany, Russia, any of those outrageous countries. No. For better or worse, I'd rather live right here in the United States, although they are very, 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 very far from perfect when it comes to a realization, a manifestation of freedom, especially freedom for the individual. Back when this country was being created, individualism was considered anathema. You can't have individuals running around thinking what they want to think. That was the worst of the worst. But indeed, that's exactly what the country should have, in my estimation, been championed. A free world where every man and or woman was free to live as they saw fit. Now, as we always say in these cases, that doesn't mean you can beat up on your neighbor or destroy his property or any of that. But within bounds, you should be able to live free by your own justifications. You shouldn't need to wake up one morning and understand that you must have a career, okay, in one of the arenas set up for you by the aristocrats just to make your way in this world. You should not have to make that choice. So, that being said, we should hold a competition, I think, in the elite colleges, the Ivy League, and a few others, and ask the students to write their version of a Declaration of Independence. See what we come up with, you know. The prize would be a free trip to Disney World, say, or perhaps unlimited lifetime provided cell phones for life. A cell phone for life. This would encourage the students to do their writings. All right, so that's that, and that's that. What else do we have here for your entertainment? So I go on here to say that essentially Monticello was what it really was a temple to aristocratic life, the life of the high and the rich and famous, which of course the public man, Thomas Jefferson, often let it be known how much he despised aristocracy and how much he saw the promise of equality residing in the common man. Now that was his lip service to the common man. Oh, these aristocrats are terrible. Look at that common man over there, cleaning the streets, shoveling the dung off the curb. Those common men, they're my type of people. So says TJ. And look at those aristocrats in their fineries, in their fancy shoes, in their smelly stuff. Such effeminate people. So, once again, he's saying one thing, but he really believes in another. Only the common man could be trusted to get the builders of the new state right. Of course, that is not what Jefferson had. Jefferson, the top line folk, still rules. So that's not what Jefferson had in mind. And the top rated people, top line, the upper crust, the upper class, still to this day rule the roost. A favorite quote of mine, it's not a quote, it's me quoting myself. No one gives up power willingly. No one. And that's why when I be looking into the causes for the Civil War, the concept of nullification will jump up in front of you, in front of anybody who's looking into the causes of the Civil War. And that nullification is simply that the states have the right to shut down and not agree with something the federal government is trying to force down their throats. Okay? Now, what I found interesting is that, well, for me it was interesting, that nullification had come up long before the Civil War, and they wanted to give that right to all the states. But the discussion in the book on that happening turned into, I don't know, a cloud, a dust. And I never really felt I understood what happened with nullification in the creation of this country. But when you think of it, if you had nullification, which is basically the state of Jersey or the state of Maryland saying, no, we're not going to do that, well, then you don't have a country. You have no union. It's a problem. It's a big problem because you don't want a 800-pound gorilla such as the federal government beating down on everybody else. You just don't want that. That's unsatisfactory. And that's what we have. And, I don't have an answer for that. How do you get around that? Listen, I just don't see it. So anyway, so we're done with that card. And so I'm pretty much done with the things I wanted to bring to everybody's attention on this book. But I want to say one thing. If you've been listening to me, you know one thing. I'm not a big fan of Thomas Jefferson. But I am a big fan of the book, not because it gives the biography of Thomas Jefferson, which I clearly don't believe it does. But, and I've said this before, it gives you a good slice of American life, American politics, the United States of America during the time just before its creation and during the first three, a little bit of the fourth presidency. A little bit of Washington, a little bit of Adams, a little bit of Jefferson, and now we're going to get a little bit of Madison. Okay, and that's so I recommend you seek this book out and you read it. And if you read in a fashion other than myself, which is that you basically pick the book up and read most of it in 1, 2, or 3 settings, you'll get right through it. I don't do that. I read an hour here, an hour there. So it takes me forever to read something. Not that I'm a slow reader, I just don't want to dedicate the time. I need to get better with my piano playing. I really think that if I had a Steinway, I'd sound great, but I don't have a Steinway, and my wife doesn't want me to buy one. So all I want to do is buy a Steinway, a big-time sports car, a yacht, you know. Some of the things the aristocrats have. But she won't let me do that. And I'm stuck here. What can I tell you? At least I got Bluebird Semaphore to open up and listen to me. Well, I think that's enough time, folks. And if anything else comes up about Thomas Jefferson, I'll let you know. I've already decided I'm not going to visit Thomas Jefferson's home, just like I'm not going to visit Mount Vernon. And the reason being is that I don't want to be captured in a house, in a place where everybody around me is going, ooh, and ah, did you see that? Ooh, ah, did you see that? Ooh, ah, did you see that? I don't want to be there. No, if I'm going to go there, kick everybody else out, give me the keys, and I'll go look around. I'll see what Jefferson's got in his museum of Jefferson greatness as you walk in the entryway and down through the first couple of hallways. The Museum of Jefferson greatness, built by himself, collected and picked out by himself, the man who was everything to himself. I will subsume myself into this, but I have to be in there by myself. Don't think that I'm going to steal anything, because, you know, I got a lot of nice things myself. I don't need his stuff. You know, look at this. Look at this. I think I showed you guys this before. Look at this. Huh? What do I need Jefferson for? Look at that. Huh? You try and find another one like that. Okay? I got it. He don't. You know? Well, how about this? How about this? Huh? Look at this. A little Christmas light. Look at this. Nice, huh? Which is very interesting, by the way. I saw the delay that occurred in turning this lamp on. You see that? You heard the click, but it had to then, the light had to go all the way to the screen, all the way to the camera. It had to be processed and then thrown up to the screen. So to me, that was about a second or more delay, which is what the advertisers or the people who built this. By the way, this is somewhat of an antique. You're not gonna find this anywhere. And I had to adjust to get it to actually work. Although I just a few more things I want to do with it. So I'm going to turn it on again. Now listen for the click, and then see when the light comes on. See that? That had to be a second. It's great. Science, Jefferson. This is science. Not reading a bunch of 3,000-year-old, ancients, and then regurgitating it so that everybody can know how smart you are. This is pure science. Okay, so everybody saw the pure scientific experiment of the processing delay, light delay, all that good stuff. You fortunate people who are watching this video have now entered the realm of pure science. Did I hear a phone? Did I hear that? Let me see. Let me shut this down first.